Ladies and gentlemen, thank you again for joining us. To all those in attendance today here at the LA Convention Center, to those around the world who are joining us to discuss the myriad of atrocities and injustices taking place in Myanmar, I would like to thank you for your support. Thank you for your continued involvement, not just today, but throughout the year. And as you leave and go home and you take this information and you empower yourself to affect the change in the world around you, please remember these people and that they've given a lot, both of themselves and their many pursuits to achieve a sense of stability and peace for people everywhere. So we'll start off with a question here. This one coming to me for Mr. Matthew Smith, or any genocide expert, but specifically you, sir. Could you please advise how you would bring to justice those who've committed genocide in Myanmar or Burma? What steps could be taken?
Yeah, it's a very good question. Unfortunately, and I hate to disappoint, but I don't have a great answer for that question. But I think part of what we're trying to do is establish the facts, and I think there are. It was mentioned earlier the need to play the long game in one of the presentations, and I think. Yeah, I think it's important to keep that in mind. Right now, justice and accountability are always at the forefront of what we're doing, but there are a number of objectives that we're working toward right now. First and foremost, an amendment to the citizenship law, and first and foremost to try to effect an end to the abuses that are taking place. In terms of international justice, I think to keep a focus on the need to bring the perpetrators of these abuses accountable is essential. It's not going to happen in Burma anytime soon, and when that is the case, when domestic remedies have been completely exhausted, that's when one starts to talk about international justice. And I think enlisting people like these guys and many of you is definitely a step in the right direction. But perhaps Tom or Dr. Stanton would like to add to that.
I can just make a comment on the international justice side. Two ways are possible in international justice. One is to have international experts on justice be of assistance to Burmese officials after there is a transition in government. In other words, you need to get a change in the Myanmar government before you can even do that. In this case, the experience I've had is, of course, with Cambodia, where eventually the Cambodian government asked for UN assistance in setting up a tribunal. It took 30 years. That's where you take the long-term view. But we still, have been able to put on trial some of the top leaders of the Khmer Rouge. They're old men now and women, but that has been of some help, I think. I think a better example probably, though, is Rwanda, where you have actual imposition of an international tribunal by UN Security Council resolution. A very difficult thing to achieve, because there you have probably the probability of opposition by China until maybe China changes its attitudes on international justice. The thing about history is that things can change. China may change its attitudes and may be willing to abstain, for instance, on creation of such a tribunal. We found that out when we created the Rwandan tribunal. They abstained, just as they abstained when we were able to grant jurisdiction for the International Criminal Court over events in Darfur. By writing the resolution properly to immunize people from countries that weren't parties to the Rome Statute of the International Criminal Court. We got the United States, Russia, and China all to abstain on that resolution that referred the case to the International Criminal Court. So in other words, there are ways under international justice to achieve these kinds of things. But my own preference is, as I say, the Rwandan experience where, in fact, local justice was used to try most of the cases, in which 100,000 gacaca trials, as they're called, trials on the grass, were actually achieved, and it brought about a great deal of reconciliation and justice in the country. So I actually think that adaptation of traditional Burmese judicial procedures might be the best way in the long run.
The other part of the long view that I think is important that Dr. Stanton pointed out is the importance of people knowing now that they will be held accountable. That it may take years, it may take decades, but you will be held accountable. And that's extremely important for people to understand, for people to realize. Also in the short run, you know, I found it kind of amazing that that when it comes to political, if there is political will, things happen. So, for example, during the crisis with Ukraine, the Russian takeover of Crimea, the response from the White House was strong, it was swift, and there was the execution of sanctions and penalties against individuals within the government who were determined to be responsible for some of the problems that were being created. I mean, the United States was committed to holding individuals, Russian leaders, accountable. Well, there's no reason in the world why that can't happen right now. And in fact, it has been a long time since the United States has updated the Specially Designated Nationals List, SDN, where individuals who are shown to be connected to and responsible for these violations are held accountable, and that there are penalties that are exacted upon them. So I think the long view is extraordinarily important. I think there are options in the short view that, if the political will existed, could be exercised, but either long or short, it's critical to know it may take us a while.
Right. Well said. Here's another general question for the dais. What would be some recommended effective actions for a typical citizen, say of the United States, or not necessarily the US, but any country, in order to help stop not just this genocide, but any genocide, something they could take, a simple action perhaps?
Well, it's a very good question, and I think it's extremely important when you link awareness. When you talk about awareness, you link it to action. You give people very specific things that they can do. So that's why I brought the postcards today. Go to your website, www.endgenocide.org, and sign the petition to President Obama. Let's get a wave of action. I'll tell you the way things happen, by the way, in Washington with respect to calls and communications to members of Congress. You know, when I was in Congress, I wouldn't say how many, letters we get about this or how many letters. I just asked the staff, what's going on? What are you hearing? What's happening? And if they said, geez, we've been getting this influx of calls on X or Y, it wouldn't have to be that many, but if they came in at, within a certain period of time and they were coming from throughout the district, it wouldn't take that many to be noticed. And then if I went out on the trail or in a town meeting and I'd heard that from my staff and one person raised their hand and asked about what was happening with Y, boom, it's an impression. And then when I get back to Congress, someone is knocking on my door and saying, would you be a co-sponsor of H.R. 437? Yes, I will. So this is how it happens. It doesn't take a huge number of people. It just takes people being willing to make the call, being willing to show up at the event, being willing to sign the petition, and signal to Washington that there is a political constituency for this. And that, more than anything else, is what I would recommend that you do. And then the Senate, the Congress is still in session. The Senate is about to consider its resolution on the Rohingya. Bob Menendez, Senator Robert Menendez of New Jersey is the chairman of the Senate Foreign Relations Committee. He'll be introducing it. Follow him, or go again back to our website, sign up, and we'll send you, as soon as that is introduced, we'll send you a notice that it's introduced and ask you to notify your senator that please co-sponsor being involved in that. So that's my recommendation for how specifically you might respond.
Yes. Thank you.
Just one additional comment that Nama actually brought up in her speech, which I really agree with. This organization, BAMA, could assemble essentially a speakers bureau to go around and give talks about what's going on. A lot of people just are ignorant about what's going on in Myanmar, and it doesn't take that much training for you to go around and talk to groups. And she was right. The faith community in the United States is still the backbone of a lot of the social organization of the United States. And so you could reach churches, mosques, temples, all kinds of synagogues, all kinds of groups of people with this sort of witness.
Yeah, this is good advice, really. Shifting gears for just a moment, this is a question asking more specifically, and I know that not everybody up here is necessarily an expert on every genocide that's occurred across the planet, but this person is curious to know what similar traits might be found between the situation in Rakhine State and the genocide that took place in Rwanda. If there's any commonalities or anything you'd like to address so that we shouldn't take note of.
Oh, I can tell you that every single one of the stages that I went through was also present in Rwanda. So that's one way what's happening, in Rakhine State is exactly like what happened in Rwanda. And I won't go through all those stages with you again. I did write an article about it that simply was entitled, "Could the Rwandan genocide had been prevented?" It's on our website, and you're welcome to look at it, in which I do go through it by stage. My own experience with genocide has been that, in fact, all genocides that I've studied so far go through these stages, so that you can find it in all of them.
Yeah, unfortunately becoming too common an occurrence. Well, let's move on. Let's change gears here. The children, as a father myself, the stories that affect me most deeply are how children are affected by these conflicts. Children who aren't old enough to maybe process the intricate, details of social history and everything else that goes into it, and all they know is the fear, perhaps. What could be done to help the Rohingya children in regards to health care and education or their overall state of well-being?
So there are some. The first thing that comes to mind when I hear that is humanitarian aid. Mm-hmm. It's obviously not an area that we work in, but there are organizations that are on the ground that are doing what they can under very difficult circumstances to provide aid. Specifically, there's a group, they're a faith-based group called Partners Relief and Development, and their mandate explicitly is free and full lives for children. And in some areas, they're the only medical doctors that are on the ground are from this organization in some of the camps in Rakhine State. And so they're doing what they can to provide much-needed aid to Rohingya children right now.
Mm-hmm. Another couple of organizations are UNICEF, which is one of the few UN agencies that's not bounded by any national boundaries whatsoever. It is mandated to go anywhere to help children. And another one is, of course, the International Committee for the Red Cross. which sends doctors and sets up hospitals.
But let me just say that in a general sense, the children, and the greatest heartbreak for me in those camps were just with all the children, and particularly the sick ones, and then the kids with no education, with no hope. It was just unbelievable. And so what we're talking about in this conference is about changing the conditions faced by these entire families and this entire people, and creating the political will necessary to make that happen. And I think that children are the greatest victims of what's happening there now, and children will be the greatest beneficiaries of the success of this campaign.
Yeah, and the effect on future generations as well of having lived through this. I can only imagine what those long-term effects might be. Yes, please.
It just occurred to me that the new special rapporteur, UN special rapporteur on human rights in Myanmar, so Tomas Quintana is just finishing and is being replaced by a Korean woman named Yang Hee Lee, who was formerly on the committee on the Convention of the Rights of the Child, and she was on the committee when they reviewed Myanmar's the extent to which Myanmar was upholding its obligations. So I guess the short of it is that the new special rapporteur is somewhat of an expert on child rights, and so if people are particularly interested in child rights issues with respect to the Rohingya or otherwise, I think you might have a very open audience with her, and some advocacy opportunity might be there also.
That's good to hear. That's good to hear. Another question that we have here up on the dais for you, Mr. Tom, is a pointed question. I'm going to have to paraphrase a little bit because it's a very long couple of paragraphs leading into it, but it refers to your work for Aung San Suu Kyi in the acquisition of the Nobel Prize. And it's a two-part question. It's asking that given her silence on the subject, do you feel any sort of regret or repentance for having campaigned for her in that regard? And to follow up to that, had she promised anything to you or to the circle that she was working with about human rights or genocide or anything like that during your visits to Burma? Has there been anything outside of the public eye, perhaps?
Well, the short answer is no. I do not have regrets. By the way, that campaign that was referred to in my introduction was actually called the Nobel Peace Laureate Campaign for Aung San Suu Kyi and the people of Burma. And the importance of Aung San Suu Kyi during that campaign was she became a very important resource, because we could, as we heard earlier, a story could be told about this injustice that was being done to this woman who was being courageous and taking on these generals. That was an extraordinarily important and powerful story, and she was an extraordinarily and is an extraordinarily important leader. So I don't have any regrets at all of that, but I'll tell you, of course I'm disappointed, as we all are. And I spent time talking to political operatives, members of the various political parties that I feel more of a kinship with, including the NLD. I met with MPs, I met with others, just to kind of talk shop, you know, I mean, one politician or another. Let's go off and sit down and have some, eat a meal, have some tea, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, it's extraordinary the level of fear that permeates the political infrastructure in Burma right now. I had some people who I respect, political leaders, who looked me in the eye and said it would be political suicide if I were to stand up and oppose the marriage law in which monks, when I was there, 10,000 monks at a convention had just endorsed this marriage law. They supposedly have literally millions of people who have signed at these rallies, signed endorsements of this marriage. Now that's grassroots organizing, but the dark side of grassroots organizing. And these politicians are fearful that if they were to oppose it, it would be the end of their political career. Politicians have tough choices to make. Political leaders, government leaders are in very difficult positions. And we make our choices. and we as a public can disagree or agree. With Aung San Suu Kyi, I think she's helped us along the path of the progress that I mentioned, the incremental progress. I hope that she will come around and help us with progress on this moral issue. But whether she does or not, or how she does or not, I think the fundamentals remain the same, and that is to create the political space in this country and there, and in countries around the world, for political leaders to have the willingness, either because they're impelled or compelled, or at least feel safe and secure in standing up and doing the right thing.
Yes, it's well put. If we have any other questions from the audience, please go ahead and move those forward. But in lieu of that, at this time, we're going ahead and we're going to ask the speakers up here on the dais to share with us if they have any closing thoughts, any final remarks, anything else that they had left to share before we call it a day here at the convention. We'll start down there at the end. Doctor?
You represent the cutting edge right now of the human rights movement in the world. So don't ever forget the importance of your movement. Your movement is a movement for all human beings everywhere. Keep that in mind, because you are our leaders. It's up to us to support you, to listen to you, to let you lead. And so that's why I encourage you so much never to give up hope. The reason I know that is so true is because back in 1988, I was asked to be the legal advisor for the Ukrainian independence movement when there was still a Soviet Union. And everybody thought the Soviet Union was forever. No one thought it would ever crumble, that it would ever end. And some people, though, had a vision that it could end. And they asked me to come and help them organize an independence movement. And I said, how can I help you? I'm not even a member of the Ukrainian Bar Association. And they said, well, don't worry about that. What we want is your experience in the American Civil Rights Movement. Because I was one of those people who was crazy enough to go down to Mississippi and get shot at for helping people register to vote. And they did shoot at us. But what they also did is teach me the techniques of nonviolent resistance. They are the most powerful techniques to overthrow a tyranny ever developed. The techniques used by Mohandas Gandhi, Martin Luther King Jr. are the techniques that are going to win the revolution for the Rohingya people.
So I don't have much to add, but I would really like to thank all of you and to thank Bama. And for some of you, there are a huge number of human rights organizations in Burma and in the border areas. And there are loads, it's a whole sea of acronyms of different organizations. And I think this acronym is absolutely the most brilliant acronym I've ever seen for any Rohingya or any Burmese organization. Yeah. And if anybody here isn't aware that Bama is essentially the pronunciation of Burmese in the language. So Burmese American Muslim Association, Bama, absolutely brilliant. I'm very honored to be here. I'm very honored to stand in solidarity with you, and we will continue to do that. So thank you very much.
Let me also close by thanking you, the organizers of this event, all of you who've attended and those of you who have been following us on the internet. I want to thank my fellow panelists who are just true champions for human rights. It has been for me an honor, truly, to be here with you and to share this afternoon. And I just simply say from the depth of my heart, Thank you for not only inviting me to participate, but thank you for your commitment to the rights and the dignity and quality of life of not only the Rohingya people, but people under siege everywhere. It is truly moving to be with and to work with and to share with people like yourself. We will prevail because we have the tenacity and the courage and the capacity and the stubbornness to keep plugging, and for being willing to keep plugging despite all the obstacles. From the bottom of my heart, thank you so very, very much.
Thank you. Thank you. Ladies and gentlemen, at this time, it is my pleasure to share with you the resolution of the Convention 2014 for the Myanmar Muslims Genocide Awareness Convention. The resolution is as follows. There are 12 points. Due to the violence acted upon Rohingya and Muslims of Burma reached the genocidal stage, based on the UN's CPPCG Convention Article 2, therefore MMGAC has declared the following resolution on protection and prevention of further genocide in Burma on the Muslims of Burma. The MMGAC condemns violence targeting Muslim populations of Burma that have passed the genocidal stages and demand that Burmese government protects the Burmese Muslims and the Rohingya in full extent. They demand the Burmese government provide full security to NGOs, INGOs, and to conduct humanitarian works in the Rakhine and conflict areas. We demand Burmese government allow international investigation teams to access the conflict areas and to bring perpetrators to justice before an international body. We demand that the Burmese government return, pardon me, I scrolled down too fast. We demand that the Burmese government return land and properties of displaced people and allow them to restore and rebuild the places of worships immediately. We demand that the Burmese government bring to justice criminals involved in the crimes targeting against Muslim people of Burma. The Burmese government must reinstate Rohingya as the original ethnic race of Burma and to grant bona fide citizenship to Burma. We demand that the Burmese government issue full equality to Muslims of Burma regarding citizenship as of the other Burmese citizens. The MMGAC will work with legal experts to bring to justice individuals or organizations involved in genocide, both in Burma and also including Rohingyas with the full extent of international law until it reached the International Court of Justice. We appeal to the U.S. Senate to have Senate hearings for Myanmar Muslims and Rohingyas issues and to pass a resolution to prevent genocide in Burma. We appeal the U.S. government to reevaluate the relationship with the Burmese government. We appeal the U.S. government and international communities to outlaw NEO extremist terror network 969 and its fashions and internationally banded terror groups. And lastly, the government of Burma must publicly apologize for the failure of its duty to prevent the Rohingya and Muslim genocide in Burma, and to the people of Burma as well as the world community. And that is the resolution for this year's convention. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to thank you all once again very much for your support and for your attendance. For those of you online, thank you as well. I would like to take a moment to honor some of our guests and some of our speakers here today with a token of appreciation from BAMA. Would you like to step up and help me to present these? Or just hand them one at a time. To the Dr. Gregory Stanton, for you, sir. For Mr. Matthew Smith. Oh, great news. The president has just arrived. That is the president of BAMA. Yes. Has just arrived and will assist us in the continued presentation. So come on down, you know. Ladies and gentlemen, a round of applause, please, for the president of the Burmese American Muslim Association. Thank you so much for joining us.
Yeah, it's beautiful.
And everyone, please take a moment and fill out one of these cards. This is for, yes, we're going to be collecting them, and this is all going to be going on to the position to the U.S. President. Well,
This is for Tom Andrews. Oh, he's not here.
he is here.
Oh, Kote Luengu. Dr. Sai. Mr. Devin. Oh.